what went on in that dressing room?
The TV, Ruben Amorim damaged that in what we think is a pretty furious critique of his team after the Brighton game. So if you remember the press conference, he was pretty strong. I don't know, of course you remember, because he called United potentially this current version the worst in history, which I think is a follow-on from how he'd been feeling in the dressing room.
Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. This is Inside United with Laurie Whitwell. Thank you, Laurie, for coming back on the show. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. You
Good.
guys okay?
Good. Jay's here as well, of course. How are you?
I'm a little bit bunged up, but I'm okay.
Still
I'm
getting
soldiering
over your
on.
cold.
Bit of man flu. Don't worry, I'm not gonna
stay back.
I'm not gonna give.
That's
you
why
big game on
let's say it's
Thursday.
finest.
Yeah.
Don't want to take him out of the game.
Exactly.
That'd be a travesty.
Loads to talk about today. Transfers. We've got Ratcliffe meeting with Ruben Amorim. We've got ins and outs. But let's start with, I would say, the biggest news of the last couple of days. And you reported about this yesterday. Is this sort of supposed bust up in the dressing room following that loss to Brighton the other day? Let's just talk me through what happened there, because there's been a lot of speculation, a lot of details. As far as you're aware, what went on in that dressing room?
Yeah, as far as our information is that the TV, the big screen TV, I don't know if you've seen it in the pre-match kind of footage that is now released by Manchester United ahead of the game, where the players are sat down in chairs and they sort of are showing the tactics on the TV. Ruben Amorim damaged that in what we think is a pretty furious critique of his team after the Brighton game. So if you remember the press conference, he was pretty strong. I don't know, of course you remember, because he called United potentially this current version the worst in history, which I think is a follow-on from how he'd been feeling in the dressing room before coming out to speak to media in the press conference. And yeah, I mean, it's notable, right? It's a pretty emotional reaction, I think, but possibly a calculated one to shock the players. He's talked about wanting to jolt people at the club, players, teams, make people realise sort of how difficult the situation is. But yeah, I think it's notable for the fact that usually after games he will be silent and he'll go and sort of consult with his coaches, go through the video analysis and then speak to players the day after at Carrington and kind of go through things in a sober fashion. So clearly the performance against Brighton changed things and he felt the need to be very vocal with his reaction.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get it, and there's a part of me that's like, go on, like, do you know what I mean? Like, tell them about themselves, get into him. We need a bit more of the sort of Fergie hairdryer treatment. My only concern is, and I don't know what you think about this, Laurie, is he not losing the plot? I don't want to be melodramatic, but is it getting to him? Is it affect? Do you get the impression that he's still trying to think how the word is? He's still sort of the cool customer that we think he is. He's not losing it a little bit, is he? Or where do you think he is? Like with it all? That's my only worry, is that he's just like he's going the way of so many other United managers and almost losing the plot a bit.
It's a fine line, isn't it, between showing emotion, showing personality, showing charisma, which is what they, that was one of the main attributes that they wanted to have in a Manchester United manager. So this is kind of perhaps the flip side of the coin, where that can't be switched off, that kind of emotion and ability to communicate with people. I would say that he's still in control of what he's doing, because when he speaks after press conferences, he said, here's your headline, about United being the worst team in history. Sorry, it does just. It's quite funny when you sort of repeat it, but he's obviously saying that for a reason, and now we can debate how that's going to be perceived by the players. That's a crucial factor in all this, because clearly he wants results to improve. The team want results to improve. The club wants results to improve. By shocking players, by being brutally honest with them, will that create a kind of mentality where they want to prove him wrong, perhaps? Or, does that say to them, we have to be honest with ourselves, and then that only through honesty can you really sort of change the performance levels that have been going on, obviously, for longer than Ruben Amorim, much longer than he's been here. But clearly, as you say there, where does it then sort of slip into a more dramatic kind of loss of control? I mean, I certainly think Sir Alex Ferguson had many, obviously the hairdryer being one of them. He used that as a technique to trigger a reaction from his players. There was a certain element of fear, wasn't there, in terms of how they were responding to him. But he'd also do it maybe to a player he knew he could take it as a message to a player on the other side of the dressing room that perhaps couldn't take that directly, but then understood that was the expectations placed on you. So I think he used to do it to Ryan Giggs, right? And the message would actually be for Nani, a few seats along. So that's something. And I do think that Ruben Amorim comes from a school of thought where he's pretty strong, right, in his approach to things, in terms of his tactical idea, in terms of what he wants from his players outside of the game. And the comparisons have been made previously to Jose Mourinho. I think we remember him, chucking a drinks basket down on the pitch side in one game, and he obviously was very strong in his sort of sentiment in matches when he felt like he needed to be in press conferences. I think Amorim's different in a way, in the sense that it feels like there's a collegiate element to it, though. Still, I know that players might bristle at some of the things that he said, but he doesn't really call out players in the sharpest of terms individually. It's kind of more collective, and he included himself in that point about the worst team in history. Sorry, I keep bringing it up, but he's saying we. He's not like this is, they are. It's trying to be together with it. But yeah, it's a fascinating point in his tenure already.
Yeah, he seems very self-aware as well, doesn't he? Like even to that point, I think when you read that as a headline, which he said this is a headline, is your headline, worst team in history, it reads quite wow. But when you watch it, it's not as bad, if that makes sense, because he lines it up by saying, here's your headline, and he's sort of saying, look, this is where we're at in terms of the results and stuff. So it's not as bad as you first look at it, but for a manager to be saying that, it's obviously not great. It's not good. We're not in a good place, are we, at the minute in Manchester United?
Do you know who that was directed at? Was it everyone? Was it a group thing? Was it? Are you aware of who was at the sort of receiving end of this barrage?
I believe that it was a collective thing. Okay. So afterwards in the press conference, he spoke about the players losing their tactical discipline towards the end of the game and being in different positions. And I can only imagine that that's what his irritation was born from, where he's now 15 games into his tenure and there's still an idea that they aren't necessarily following what he wants them to do, when he feels like so I'm going to have to react in a very visible, physical way. I don't think the TV was a deliberate point of which he wanted to make his point, but collateral in the kind of in the whole scheme of things. Again, there's been issues like this, hasn't there, in dressing rooms previously, where
the collateral's been David Beckham's head in the past, hasn't it? So this is a step up from that.
Exactly, and there's been no, I think players basically sat there and took on board what he was saying. So but again, we'll see the reaction, right? You've got Rangers on Thursday in the Europa League. You've got matches coming thick and fast after that. So the time to kind of reflect and talk about it, maybe there isn't that room really in the calendar, because you've got to get out there and perform on the pitch again. So it's but it is a fascinating dynamic. I mean, what do you guys think in terms of all this? Like, are you thinking that it's a good thing? You want to see a manager with passion and personality, or I think is it a slight concern? If
this is what he's like, and he's always done this, and this is what he's got the different sides of him, but this has always been a side of him, then I think that's fine, and you're going to see that when the performances are bad. If he's been like a cool, calm and collected guy his whole career, and now, like you said, he's sort of lost his head a bit, that worries me. But by the sound, what was it, after his 3 games in, we spoke to one of his former players who said they lost the first 2 or 3 games, and he said, if we don't win the next one, I'm going to quit. So he's obviously always had a bit of a emotional sort of temper to him, or whatever. I just think that if you think of all the best managers in the Premier League, whether that be Jose or Sir Alex Ferguson or Pep Guardiola or Wenger or Klopp or whoever, Wenger maybe slightly less so, but I can imagine all of them doing something like that. There's not one of them where I think, usually when managers win, yes, they have a good relationship with the players, but there has to be an element of control, and usually, unfortunately, that has to come through a bit of fear. And I think that if people are sat there concerned and worried and emotional about what he's doing, that shows that they respect him and that they're worried about his opinions, and hopefully that will change their actions. Because what he's saying, it's probably not the worst United team ever because we've been relegated, but this is as bad as I've ever seen, or as you've pretty much ever seen.
And the context of it is having spent all this money, and they should be incubated from this kind of fall in performance, shouldn't they, in terms of their revenues and things.
So I think it's fair enough, and if the players don't like it, then but we always sit here saying this, don't we? We said it when Ten Hag came in, and we said it when Jose came in, and these players are to blame and the players are to blame. But then you wait 12 months or 18 months, if the results don't turn around, then everyone blames the manager anyway. So he knows that. He has to get it right himself.
Well, this is it. I think he's very aware of the realities of the job. He's spoken about it, hasn't he? Publicly, sort of gone there in a way, sort of saying, you know, I won't change, and if they want me to, then maybe I should leave. And, you know, he's kind of already, he's very honest. And I guess through honesty, you hope to create a strong, thriving group of players. But to your point, absolutely. We've seen, haven't we, in the documentary, Mikel Arteta, you know, losing his rag in the dressing room. Pep Guardiola, you know, obviously we saw him at Brentford going on the pitch and kind of, you know, acting very demonstrably to Ortega.
Yeah, it was weird.
Yeah, so it's okay.
Shouting in his eyes. I've never seen someone do that.
But I think you do need all the top managers are a little bit crazy.
Absolutely.
Aren't they?
Yeah, look at Simeone. Like he's turned Atletico Madrid into one of the most like consistent, difficult to beat teams in the world for a decade now. And I can't imagine a time where he's not screaming and smashing tellies up. Like, I think they all have to have that edge to them.
I do. And I feel for Amorim because, obviously, like you said, we're 15 games in now, whatever. And he's probably, you can forgive it in the first few games or whatever, but he's probably looking at players who he's already told to do certain things, losing that discipline, like he's mentioned, not being in the positions he keeps telling him. Because you see him on the touchline, don't you? Sort of shouting at certain players, telling them where to go. And to be still doing that, he's probably feeling like, and them not to be doing what they're told or what they're asked, it must be frustrating for him. And you look at the games we've lost, you know, Bournemouth at home, Brighton at home, and then you go into the Emirates and getting a result. You go to Anfield and getting a result. A little while ago, we got a result at the Etihad. He said it after Anfield, didn't he? He said it's no good just turning up for these games. You've got to turn up for them all, and we haven't. So I get his frustration, and I think he's right as well. We know he can be like this sort of warm, jovial, kind person, or you know, but we need to see a bit of sort of, not just anger, but like maybe that fear factor. Maybe that was one of the criticisms people had of Ollie, wasn't it? That he was great at putting his arm around someone's shoulder and, you know, sort of being nice to them. But when it came to giving him a bit of rollicking, did he have it in him? Well, it shows like from what your article showed that Ruben Amorim has got that in him, and that's what we've been crying out for. Someone who's got both sides of that sort of personality. Because I think with Jose it went one way, probably too far the other way. Yeah. With Ollie, probably, you know, too nice, if that's even a thing. With Ruben Amorim, he's showing both sides of it, and I think that's a positive. Yeah.
Let's move on a little bit. Let's talk about some transfers, because you did an article yesterday going through a lot of United's sort of transfer dealings, and we'll look at sort of the latest on those, any updates since that article came out. Let's start with Patrick Dorgu, because that seems to be the most kind of, you know, furthest down the line in terms of a potential transfer in. What's the latest with him? You know, United linked with him, Napoli also linked with him. Do you sort of see this one getting done, or, you know, where are we up to with that?
Yeah, I think there's it's maybe 50-50. I don't know in terms of it happening. United are in talks, obviously, and that usually indicates that there's been sort of good progress made, perhaps behind the scenes, in terms of what the transfer fee might look like, and then whether the player's receptive to the move, and obviously what Ruben Amorim would want in the circumstances, and also the recruitment team. So clearly there's been a lot of work done on him, and I think that does show also the approach that they're taking with Amorim, where they're buying a player specifically for his system. You know, the left wing back role has been, I mean, left back has been an issue for 18 months, hasn't it, with Malacia and Shaw's injuries. But this guy is obviously a more attacking minded full-back, you know, so he's a wing-back in the truest sense, I think. And so that shows that they're wanting to support the manager in his idea that he isn't going to change. You know, he reiterated that again after the Brighton game, that this is going to be his style of play. So to go for a player like this, young, 20, you know, from Serie A, obviously not played in England before, so it kind of follows the INEOS sort of blueprint almost when you look at Lenny Yoro or Manuel Ugarte or Joshua Zirkzee. That obviously brings its own sort of complications maybe, you know, in terms of adjusting to a new league, the age of the player, you know, in terms of having that experience. When you're coming into a situation like this where clearly it is a pressurised situation from the get-go, it's going to be, if it does happen, an interesting one for him to encounter. But I do think it sort of shows that United, okay, all the noises have been, it's going to be really hard to do anything in January. Money is tight, FFP is tight. There is a sense that there's some scope to do something even on a permanent deal. Perhaps it might need, you know, an Anthony going out on loan, which I think, you know, is going to happen to Real Betis. Marcus Rashford we can have a look at as well in a moment. But I feel like there's enough wriggle room in the finances to get something like this done. It just depends on the price. And I think we've seen Lecce's sporting director speak very strongly about wanting to keep him, and the negotiations are afoot. So it's definitely one to watch.
Yeah, I mean, we've been saying this, haven't we, for a little while. You mentioned the left back or left wing back position is such an issue for United. Delot struggled there. Yes, I like Delot, but he's having a bad season. Let's not sugarcoat it.
Great against Liverpool, wasn't
he?
No,
he was. You're right to say that, because that performance at Anfield, but it was like an outlier, wasn't it? Because it's not like that. That's what we've been seeing from him this season. He doesn't seem to have settled into that role, and
which is a lot to ask in mid-season.
Yeah, no, it is. He's a right back playing at left wing back, which is. It's like, double difficult, and he's, like you said, mid-season as well. Also, you look at Malacia, not an option. Luke Shaw, I think he's back in training, I believe, this week, or
could be this week. He said 2 weeks in the.
Sorry, forgive me.
Last week.
So, but still, you can't rely on him. There was maybe suggestions that you could try someone like an Ante there, but that's not happening. He's going.
Yeah.
So we need someone there. It's ridiculous that United don't have a player that can play in one of the 11 positions on the pitch, like basically. You know what I mean? It is not. We tried it at one point. We tried Martinez there, didn't we? And that's not going to work.
No. Yeah, I mean, obviously Toby Collier played at left back.
At left back. Yeah,
against
Barnsley was it?
Yeah, so not quite the same. I mean, you do wonder: is there anybody in the academy? I was Harry Amas we've touched on before, but so that does show that that there's a hesitation maybe to throw him into a difficult situation, or whether he's ready for it. Or, I don't think they obviously don't think he is. But it is quite startling that you get into a point of it's Dalot or we're gonna have to. Or Ahmad, obviously it wasn't it, against Southampton? But then he did his damage then in the kind of number 10 role, even though Anthony'd come on. In the number 10 role, Ahmad sort of seemed to kind of usurp him and just say, step aside.
By the way, I've got this son. Don't you worry about this. I'll get us some goals there. I mean, it says a lot, doesn't it, that you almost want Ahmad to play in 3 different positions at once, which says...
I think his best is that number 10, isn't it?
No, I
agree.
And
that kind of showed, didn't it?
Yeah.
Attacking the box.
You lose too much if you're pushing him.
It feels that way. He's obviously clearly very open to doing the wing-back role. And credit to him for that. I think the way that he celebrated that hat-trick was brilliant to see. Clearly so much joy and sort of warmth in playing for United. Holding the badge out. But I think that number 10 role really suits him.
Speaking of number 10s, Garnacho has been linked with moves away. It's like it went from last time you came on. We asked you, United may be willing to sell Garnacho Mania, and you said, don't rule it out. Like, keep an eye on it, kind of thing. Since then, that whole concept has kind of ramped up exponentially to the point where Garnacho's been linked with Chelsea, he's been linked with Napoli. I don't think there's been specific kind of bids been put in necessarily, but there's rumours of fees being thrown around and different places. What's going on with him? Are United trying to sell him? Do they not really want to sell him, but he's the most sellable player we've got, therefore it might happen? And, are Chelsea involved? Are Napoli involved? How does Napoli's interest in Dorgu come into this? Because there could be a little power play thing going on there. Sorry, it's about 3 questions in one, but
that's good,
generally Garnacho, what's happening?
It's a fascinating one, the Garnacho one, isn't it? Because it's clearly there's conversations happening, right? I think we saw, for example, his agent was at Stamford Bridge last night for on Monday night, for the Wolves game, and that it's fun, isn't it? It's all part of the January transfer window. Him posting a picture there, but clearly, they have, as we've reported on The Athletic, they have, had conversations around him. Napoli feels stronger there, and in terms of making proposals to United, and let's see how it falls. I think, for me, I don't think he doesn't. If he'd started this season, he doesn't want to leave United, But the way things have now gone, where it's a different system that doesn't necessarily suit his playing style, because he's at his best when he's on the wing in that flank. Perhaps even when the game's stretched and he's been able to counter attack and getting the ball and going with it. The number 10 role is different to that, and clearly from him not starting games under Ruben Amorim for majority, he wants something else from him that he's providing, and obviously he was out of the squad entirely for the City game. So then when that starts to happen, then a player might start thinking, okay, maybe I should move on. But and clearly United, he is one of the sellable assets at United. He will not only in terms of from a pure profit point of view for the fact that he came from the academy. Okay, it was like a very small compensation fee, but genuinely, like, there's not that many players in the United team that people would go, actually, we'd have him, and we'd pay decent money for him. So from that
the
point
wages
of view,
line up as well. It's not on as much as a lot of them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which then obviously flips to United. And, well, it's going to cost a bit to replace a guy like that, and the wages that would be commensurate with a player of that quality. I mean, maybe you look at the Dorgu thing and think, well, okay, he's more suited to Amorim's system, so therefore you're kind of getting a player, to match, whilst also, balancing the books. But I don't know. I think a lot of people would be sad if he did go. I don't know which way it's going to go with Garnacho this window, but clearly there's kind of there's conversations going on. So again, sort of kind of one to keep an eye on.
It just feels like a gamble either way, doesn't it? For if a club comes in and spends big money on him, they're taking a bit of a gamble because there's always a slight doubt whether he is going to reach the heights. But it's also a gamble for United because Garnacho potentially could be the guy we thought he was going to be when he burst on the scene. He's still only 20 years old. He's played a lot of football for a 20-year-old. I just don't know.
He probably played too much, didn't he? Under 10
was it? Was it like 30 consecutive starts or whatever it was when he needed a breather? You could tell that. I just think if they do sell him, also it's a big call that it's to sort of back Ruben Amorim because you're basically saying this player probably doesn't fit into your system, even though he's great and he's young and he's someone we've had as a youngster and as a kid and nurtured, and we're going to let him go because he's not the right guy for you.
And it basically means this whole idea of, I guess, having a long-term view and creating the structure from the top down, it does sort of cut against that because then you've got a head coach with a very particular sort of style of play on the pitch with players that to suit. For them to kind of get rid of Garnacho and bring in a wing back in if that does happen. What happens if Amorim does leave at some point? Does presume the manager coming in would have to play the same system.
What is their thinking on that then? Because I know Ashworth supposedly expressed some kind of unsureness, if that's even a word, or a lack of surety on what was this like complete change of system to everything United have played before. Not necessarily in terms of we want to press high, we want to win the ball back. There are definitely comparisons to Ten Hag's system, but in terms of just pure personnel, number 10s, wing backs, more centre backs needed, different types of more kind of athletic wing covering centre backs. Like it is very different, and the average lifespan of a United manager over the last decade is about 20 months, something like that. So he's been here for 2. So in 18 months' time, are we going to have to buy a load of wingers, which are probably the second most expensive position on a football pitch, sell all of our wing backs, sell a couple of number 10s, and sell a couple of centre backs? Like, have they thought about this? Do you think? Is there any hesitation to fully back this guy when he started about as badly as anyone could have imagined? I'm not saying I would get rid of him. Obviously, I think he's great, but he couldn't have started any worse, genuinely. And he could have lost to City. So
I'm being facetious.
Literally could have got worse. But 2 wins in 11.
We could be out of the FA Cup. I think is the only way it'd be worse.
Yeah, now. We could have lost every game. Yeah. But in terms of like the realistic start to a season,
in terms of the expectation,
and he plays this system that relies on just different personnel to most managers. Do you think they thought about this before they brought him in?
Yeah, they definitely thought about it before they brought him in, but I think they felt that the situation with Erik ten Hag was untenable and make a change. And okay, you definitely can criticise them for extending Erik ten Hag's contract in that scenario because they obviously had those doubts when they were, speaking to other managers around the FA Cup final, and then to do it now mid-season. Amorim's spoken about kind of preferring probably to take it at the end of a season when he would have had a full pre-season to work with the players, drill into them, because he keeps going back to this point of only having a certain number of days to work with a full group, in proper shape with proper intensity. I think he said 7 at the last count. Yeah. So whereas you get 5-6 weeks in pre-season. So that obviously is far from ideal, and so I will definitely have sympathy, empathy with Amorim's situation for whatever he's trying to do. And I think he's a very impressive person in terms of the way he conveys himself and the idea that he has and the strength of thought that he has to possess to be able to try and get this to work. But clearly, it's a tricky one. And I think if they go through and they really do, buy players for the system that he's got, that obviously is a huge show of faith in him, and maybe that would, cause some readjustments in players' minds to think, okay, we absolutely, this is our guy for the long term. But obviously we've been here before, and it's then changed, and the Dan Ashworth situation shows that if it's not working, they do act. But it feels like it's a solid relationship between Ruben Amorim and the executives.
You'd hope so, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you would, because we need this to work.
Otherwise we are totally screwed.
Yeah, we are. To have sat Seritz and arguing after the first couple of months, and then to have got rid of not just the manager Dan Ashworth during that season or even in the summer, it would be insane. So they just need to back him properly. He needs the players, and he needs time, doesn't he? Like you saying there, Laurie, he needs a proper pre-season. He needs players for the positions that they're meant to play in, rather than trying to put square pegs in round holes or whatever.
I think just a final addition, actually, I think that maybe they will think that if we just actually get better players in, good players in, then okay, they can play in different positions. So Dorgu has played in several positions for Lecce. He's only 20, so again, he's young, so you're sort of thinking, well, will he be really good in those positions if you do keep playing as a versatile player? But that being said, I think they would ideally think that, okay, well, maybe they just haven't been good enough recruitment prior to this point, so if we just get good players in, and athletic play, I think the athleticism of the team is clearly lacking, isn't it?
It's a worry.
Yeah.
You look at Arsenal and City, obviously I know they've both dropped off a bit this season, but they've been the best two teams in the league for the last couple of years. They have players who have been centre-backs their whole career playing at full-back. Like Ben White is now a full-back.
Timber's played
Timber has
back.
played everywhere. Nathan Ake is now a left-back, or has played a lot at left-back.
Guardiola.
Yeah, Guardiola, another one. So maybe there is that element of, if you get the right kind of abilities, they can kind of do a few different things. So that is a good point.
And that's what Amorim's been saying, hasn't he? He's saying, you're focusing too much maybe on the tactical idea, but actually it's just passion, desire, effort, mentality.
That is a big thing, isn't it? Definitely. On that, Marcus Rashford, there's mentioned that the pool of possible destinations for Marcus Rashford appears to be shrinking, which would be very nice.
My swimming background, I had to go there.
Yeah, it's very. Have you got a swimming
I
background?
don't know if I mentioned it.
Do you swim?
I thought you winded me up.
No, I didn't even know that.
Did he swim?
I mention it on the podcast all the time.
Oh, really?
Talk of the Devils.
I do listen to
Ian Irving winds me up about it.
But I do listen to it. Oh, have you ever covered yourself in goose fat and swam a big body of water?
No, but
Would you like to?
I went swimming. I had a proper swimming session for the first time in 20 years with my two mates that I used to swim with last week, and they are swimming the Channel in the summer.
So brave that.
Yeah, I
no chance.
I'd get hit by
I'd be so panicking that I was going to give up or lose, run out of steam.
They're rotating it, so they I think it's an hour in, an hour on the boat, an hour in, but you have to do it obviously consistent. It's very the rules for it are very strict. You have to wear trunks. You can't wear a wetsuit, for example.
Why?
And this actually came up. I don't know. They want to standardise the way that people swim the Channel, I guess. They
can't shut. Right,
there's an association for it. If you want to say you swam the Channel, you have to go by their rules.
Really?
Yeah.
You just jump in the sea and just get on with it.
No, apparently not. Honestly, I swam it. Yeah, honestly, just but apparently, so this is really sad. But I was watching Ant and Dec's Limitless win the other week.
I watched it.
There's a question. Did you see the question? What's the youngest age that anyone's ever swam the Channel?
Did you know the answer?
Obviously not, but
Is it? Can I have a guess?
I can't remember this.
27.
Okay.
No.
What are you saying?
Got to be younger than that.
14.
I remember if you go one over, then you're out. So they had 250,000
All right, I'm
saved
going to say
up.
20 then.
Well, so they went to 10 thinking we're safe. We're 10, 11.
You're joking.
So they were one away. Well, they were two away from going out.
I think their parents should be placed in jail.
That's
covered in
ridiculous.
goose fat and chucked in jail.
If you read the story, there's a really fascinating documentary. I need to watch it, but I read a review of it. And 11, he covered himself in goose fat and he swam it, and he had hallucinations and he fell asleep at one point. So
what?
It's severe. It's like a crazy physical activity. There's more people. So we're going off on a massive.
No, go on. I like this.
There's more people that have climbed Everest than have swam the Channel.
Really?
Do you know what though?
I would
worse.
My mate, I told you, when we went to Media City and he went swimming in the canal, whatever it is, the basin or whatever you want to call it, and he was like, "You coming in with me?" Because he likes all that stuff. I was like, "Not a chance. I didn't even dare do that." And that's just right. You know what I mean? In Salford Keys.
It's good, Salford. Yeah, I've done that. Yeah.
No chance. I thought, imagine getting dragged out and everyone watching you and putting it on the phone and just filming it.
At least you go out in style.
You get dragged out of water, crying.
No, forget that. And also, surely we've got a better substance than goose fat these days? Surely there's
Is that
like
what they use?
something from Halfords you
Goose
can pop
fat.
on.
Not a bit of
Halfords.
Vaseline and all
Yeah,
that.
like some sort of very, very thick car grease.
Oh right, okay.
Do you know what I mean? Not, I don't want to smell like a Sunday dinner when I get there.
Well, you'd rather smell like
what if the French
car
think
exhaust?
you sous vide yourself and they immediately kill you and eat you? Who
I think
knows?
When you get to the other side, then are you just getting a boat back?
Yeah.
Is that the plan?
So they've
Right.
got an Airbnb in Dover, and then they swim in it, and then they're in French. They're in France. In France.
Yeah, and then it's a boat back.
Yeah.
Right. Do you have a boat going near you?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
That's not too bad then, because I thought it's just like off you go, and if you don't make it, you're on your own.
Yeah.
No,
Right.
they're tracking you. They're on
Right.
to you.
Okay. That's not too shabby then, because I'd always think like you might get, is it 20 miles away or something in total?
Now you have actually asked me a question I don't know.
Sorry.
Something like that, yeah.
Right.
sounds
So
about
you
right.
might get like 9 miles in and you goose, and that's like
You goose
Nah,
from the
goose-
start.
yeah,
That's the
goose
whole
fat.
point. You have to goose before
like
you get in the water.
that's what I'd panic with. I'd probably go about 200 metres and everything now, sat that. That's far too risky. Let's go back. Like I gave it a go.
Yeah, it's 21 miles.
21 miles? No, not a
There you
chance. There's no chance of me even attempting that.
Speaking of making moves to Europe,
Here we go. Very good. I was wondering how you were going to bring this back
Well done.
to
Well done. Kept it.
normality.
Marcus Rashford's got no end of offers from the continent, although he's not covered in goose fat as yet. You mentioned there about possible destinations seem to be shrinking, so there's been mention of AC Milan, and there was some sort of delegation sent over to Milan apparently, you can correct me if that's wrong, by Marcus Rashford. There's Borussia Dortmund had been linked. There was mentions of Barcelona, but that almost seemed more like where Rashford wanted to go than them wanting him. What's going on with that? We then saw these reports that actually he'd be up for playing again if if nothing happens. Like, is this backtracking? Are you worried? Do you think it's no one wants him and he's kind of ready to play?
Well, I think there's certainly going to have to be if he does stay, a considered way of how that is communicated and kind of the messaging that's sent out. So I guess maybe the stories yesterday were part of that. But I would say that the opportunities for Rashford felt quite abundant at, sort of earlier in the window. Certainly a lot of teams are interested, right? It just always comes down to finances because he's on a lot of money, and they obviously no club will pay what United are currently paying him to have him on loan. But will they pay a portion that United are satisfied with so that then he goes on loan and he increases his value? Obviously Rashford's own thoughts are very essential to this as well. He's not going to go anywhere that he doesn't want to play his football. But yeah, the AC Milan route was a very live one. His brother, Dwayne Maynard, his agent, went out there to speak to AC. But it looks like they're going to do Kyle Walker on loan, or sorry, maybe a permanent actually, from Manchester City. And that would leave them with, they've only allowed sort of one British player in the squad because of post-Brexit rules. They can have more, but they're sort of taken up by two non-EU places, and that's per window. So I think they can add more, but it's not that they can't like kind of swap out a player now and then get Rashford in as an additional one. So that if Walker goes, from what I understand that would mean Rashford is off, and they're obviously advancing talks with Walker as it stands. Borussia Dortmund definitely looking at it, but their situation with their manager is sort of complicating matters because he's under pressure, Nuri Sahin, and so I think everyone's kind of waiting on how that resolves itself and then maybe looking at it again. And clearly these clubs that are perhaps thinking about making a move, you've got a couple of weeks left of the transfer window, they're going to leave it till late, aren't they? Because they will feel that the pressure's then on United to accept a lower contribution to his salary, because the alternative for United is to have him on full pay, not playing football, or Amorim has to reintegrate him, which would be a very complicating navigation, I would say.
I guess I'm answering my own question here, but with it being a loan, does his overall wages have to continue to add up to his current contract? Because obviously if he just moved to Milan on a permanent, he could accept 20 grand a week. Not that he ever would. Yeah. But with it being a loan, does he have to get his full wages paid between us and Milan somehow? Yeah. So that's why there's always going to be that.
Yeah, and even if he went on a permanent, there's always a negotiation then with these players that are leaving if they're going to earn less at their future club than they would do at United, because they would say, well, I've signed a contract for this amount of money per week. I want paying. Sometimes they want paying in full. If they don't want to leave, that then puts the leverage on the club. But if they've kind of expressed maybe desire to go, then the club might justifiably say, well, okay, you do want to go though, so let's talk
I had
about
this
it.
when I tried to leave my Virgin Media contract. They made me pay the entirety of the contract that I owed just to move to Sky.
Well, really?
Yeah. So it's fair enough, isn't it?
You knew what you were signing?
Yeah,
I did.
Virgin.
I signed 24. I thought it was an 18-month deal. It was a 24-month.
We've all done it. Can you see a scenario where Ruben and Marcus sit down and become bezies again? Because if he doesn't go anywhere, the idea of him just not even sitting on the bench seems slightly ludicrous.
Yeah.
Even though I get it if he's not trained or whatever, but can you see a way of, what do you think this is?
It just feels such a strong line in the sand for Amorim to have drawn. And obviously, publicly, he's been saying it's, my decision based on, what I'm seeing, and I don't think he's said anything particularly strong on the whole situation. I guess he, in the post-Derby press conference, he was sort of touching on, I watch everything around players. So he's kind of getting into that.
He touched on it against Brighton, after Brighton, was it, where he said is it up to him or something? I'm paraphrasing. He sort of said
he said that at one point, yeah. But he's also said it's not the team's current issues aren't down to Marcus, So he's not fluctuating. I think he's just being honest in different moments about what the reality is. But yeah, I think it will be because he's been so strong on it. He will want to see a huge, from his perspective, improvement in Rashford's application in training to then put him in the starting lineup, because I think he made a point of taking him out when I think he had support from the squad about that, and so that then to change that, it needs something else to happen for that to be a consistent message from him to the team.
When you say that, sorry, I didn't mean to. When you say about he had support from the squad to do that, is that sort of saying that the squad were sort of looking at what was going on in training and sort of got it, understood the reasons why he wasn't in the team, basically because they could see he wasn't giving it his all? My
information is that, yeah. I mean, I would assume, I know that he would reject that allegation, but I think that is a fair appraisal from multiple sources of what the picture was. And yeah, I mean, so I think, but it's always it's never a. There's always ways of solving these kind of issues, right? I mean, we thought that Jadon Sancho was absolutely done at United when Erik ten Hag exiled him, and to be fair, I suppose he kind of was. He went to Borussia Dortmund, and then he came back in pre-season, and ultimately he left, the start of this season. So maybe that was all to reintegrate him so that they could get a bit of value and a bit of, negotiation sort of leverage in that particular scenario. But if you've got a player that's got 3 years left on his contract in the summer still, the highest earner or second, if not the highest, then there's going to have to be some kind of resolution there. The Barcelona one is clearly, it feels like, to me, his preference. And at the start of the window, I'd heard that Barcelona were a genuine option for Rashford, and I was kind of trying to figure it all out, because obviously at that time they hadn't been able to register Dani Olmo, and you're thinking, how's this going to solve itself?
They can't even buy a fucking meal deal on that business card at the minute at Barcelona, let alone get Rashford for 350 grand a week.
They just pull another lever.
What? Well, the lever they pulled was
they're just selling the club off.
Yeah. The future earnings of the club. Yeah, the executive boxes, VIP boxes. They've sold the futures to that. So you sort of, okay, well, it might be okay for the time being, but in a few years' time,
what are they playing?
And Dani Olmo's injured now, I think, as well.
That's probably a relief to me. Probably like, that saved us a few quid.
Unregistered.
But apparently they can, now make moves in the market.
Right. I mean, obviously, I think that if I was Marcus Rashford, I would want to go to Barcelona of those three options. Obviously, they're the biggest club. They're the one that is most likely to win the big trophies. There's been reports in the last sort of day or two that Rashford is willing to play for United again, is willing to rejoin the squad, kind of thing. That brings me, assuming that that's true, that he has said that or he's told people that that's the case, that leaves me with a couple of options. The first one is he doesn't know why he's been left out of the squad, because otherwise, why hasn't he done the thing he needs to do to get back in? Do you know what I mean? I'm willing to play again. Amorim keeps saying Rashford knows what he needs to do to get back in. So what is it? He hasn't been willing to do the thing he needs to until now, until he's realised that maybe these deals aren't as likely. Or does Rashford not know why he's being left out? Because otherwise, surely he would do what Amorim wants and get back in if he's up for playing.
Yeah.
These things can't all be true.
I think he knows why he's been left out.
Right.
I think there would just be a difference of opinion over that, really.
Right.
So, you know, he would say, I think, you know, for example, the Everton game, he started, scored 2 goals, you know, so from that point of view, he's doing his job well in that game. Okay, you can then stretch it out over a longer period of time and definitely have questions. But, you know, I think that the stories about him training well since that, I think some people would have that perception. I think some people might have a mixed response to that. So whether or not, in terms of him getting back into the team, I'm sure he would be happy to play for Manchester United again. He's a United fan. In the interview that he did with Henry Winter, he never said, I don't want to ever play for United again. Like, he just said, maybe it's time for a fresh challenge. And there's one argument to be made that he was responding to the stories that came out about United being open to offers for him. So it's this kind of balance between, are you trying to sell me, or maybe I'll take the initiative here and sort of put my own views out into the public domain. And so I think there's so many different ways to look at it, but I certainly, there's a clear way in which he could get back into the team. I just think it would take quite a significant change.
It's a shame, innit? Because he is probably, well, I say probably, for me, he's our most talented attacker in terms of what he can do with the football.
Pure ability, got to be, hasn't it? In terms of his record as well.
Yeah, like you know,
you're with a squad here that is desperate for goals, and you've got a guy that has actually done it. Okay, I know it's fluctuated at times, but he's obviously got. I think he's scored the most goals for United, hasn't he? In the squad.
Yeah, even now I think he's still one of our top scorers in the Premier League. I think he's our
he will be.
Yeah, second top scorer, whatever. It's just, I mean, it is what it is.
Only 5 teams have scored fewer goals than United this season in the Premier League.
Jesus wept. This is why Ruben Amorim's saying we're the worst ever.
Yeah, I mean
the evidence is there.
We spoke before about the number of goals that we've scored in the last few seasons. I think it was like 56 or 57 under Solskjaer though, and Ratcliffe, and then it was 58, then it was 57 last season. Now we've scored 27 after, was it 22 games? So we're on for even fewer than it has been by probably maybe 8 or 9 goals. Like, we need goals. Moving on to another player, Casemiro. He was linked with moves out. It looks like Amorim's given up all sort of faith in him to me, bringing on Toby Collier multiple times now instead of Casemiro in that position. Clearly wants someone with more legs, a bit more athleticism, maybe willing to follow the instructions a bit more, who knows. But we can see from a technical perspective and a physical perspective, he's not fancying Casemiro anymore. There were rumours early in the window of Saudi Arabia being interested. I know that's a bit of a weird thing to say with a country, but the way they own the clubs, it is sort of like that. Al Nassr was one that was mentioned, I think, in one of your articles. You sort of wrote about how Cristiano Ronaldo's Al Nassr, the club reported to have been looking at an approach for the former Brazil international Casemiro, aren't now in the market for the 32-year-old. What's happened there? Is there any hope of him leaving in January, or is that just wait till the end of the season?
Yeah, I thought there was genuine prospect to that at one point. Maybe I was incorrect. Spoke to people recently, and the very clear impression is that they won't be making an approach, Al Nassr, and they seem to be the club with the finances that would be required to do that. So, yeah, it feels like that's a very quiet scenario at the moment. And Casemiro is, like Rashford, one of the players that would move the dial on United's cash flow, because he earns such a lot of money for what United are looking at in terms of the wage bill. So, him going off the wage bill would free up things. And so, obviously, that's why there's been conversation. And maybe that's why he's out of the team. That's what I mean about the Rashford situation. There's a view that, okay, if you want somebody to go, then you kind of leave them out of the team and leave them out of the squad. So, you kind of make it more of an appealing prospect to leave. I don't know that that's what's going on, but it's one argument that's been made.
And it's just a bit of a shambles, isn't it? You've got Casemiro on whatever wages he's on, can barely get a kick. Marcus, who's on silly money as well, who's not involved at all. We've just sent Anthony's on the verge of a move away. It looks like, I don't know, we're going to be paying some of those wages as well. I mean,
I don't think it's full coverage from Betis.
Yeah, so
but he's not on. He's not on
to be fair. He's not on the same amount of money as Marcus Rashford and Casemiro. He's on big money, but not that big money. I mean, it just shows you what a mess we've been in to be in this position to sort of make these decisions in not just in transfers but also with wages as well. And yeah, it's just really frustrating. I was watching it. I think it might have been the Newcastle game, I think, where you looked at it and you think, you've got players that are either not up to it on massive money or not getting in the team. And I just thought, look where we are on the pitch. We're just miles away from where we need to be. And we've spent so much money and we're spending so much money on these players. It is ridiculous. And I think this is one of the reasons why I do feel sorry for Ruben Amorim, because he's inherited a bit of a mess, really, hasn't he? Let's have it right.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what options has he got in midfield where he's having to rely on 20-year-old Toby Collier as the sort of the next player to come on to replace 19-year-old Kobe Mainoo? But obviously Mainoo's got a lot more experience. Where you've got, your striking options are either Højlund or Xerxes. I like them both, but not exactly dripping in goals, are they?
No.
It's difficult. It really is. I do feel for the manager.
I think on the contract front, just to have a little bit of optimism, because it's hard to have too much about United. When you look at some of the United's biggest earners, Casemiro, Rashford, Sancho, I know he's not at United, but still a United player. Mason Mount, another one in that ballpark. Bruno Fernandes. But after Casemiro, Rashford, and Sancho, there is a bit of a decent chunk of a drop. Like we are kind of. There was a point where we had like Varane. Was Casemiro and Ronaldo there at the same time? But certainly in that ballpark, Sancho.
I think De Gea was on big money.
De Gea was on big money. Ronaldo
well.
was in the squad at that point as well. There was a time where we had 5 or 6 players in that like 250, 300 plus. Martial was on a lot of money.
Yeah.
We're not that far off having a more sense. If Rashford leaves and Casemiro goes and then Eriksen leaves on a free and maybe Sancho's going to go, it kind of looks a bit more sensible all of a sudden. We're not that far off it making some sense, are we?
And to be fair, they were addressing that in the previous regime where they were giving out contracts, say to Rasmus Højlund, Andre Onana, where they were incrementally increasing. So, based on appearances, but also I think based on longevity at the club. So the initial salary wasn't breaking the bank. They very much wanted to address that. There was a clear incentive for them at that point.
Yeah. Just moving on a little bit, you wrote an article the other day as well that Jim Ratcliffe had a bit of a chat with Ruben Amorim. I think this was after the Southampton game, wasn't it? So a win, but a sort of kind of concerning performance, especially when you outplayed at home for 70 minutes by the worst team in Premier League history. It's not, to put it in a few words, it's not great. Do you know what that chat was about? Do you know kind of the emotions coming out of that chat on Ratcliffe and Amorim's side?
Yeah, I'd like to say absolutely, but clearly I don't know exactly what they spoke about. But I get a sense that surely he's talking a little bit about transfers, right? Or the running of the club, what had just happened in the game. We saw, didn't we, Ratcliffe in the director's box looking kind of ashen-faced, for a decent chunk when Southampton were leading 1-0, and I mean that would have been a real disaster. I mean it's bordering on that, isn't it, at the moment? But imagine if they'd lost that game, and then we saw him, celebrating when Ahmad scores at the end, and it's invigorating, isn't it? I know the circumstances shouldn't be like that for Manchester United, but it's still a nice sensation being in Old Trafford in that scenario where a guy scored a hat-trick and it's a comeback win, it's late and it's in front of the Stretford end. And so I think there was buoyancy around Ratcliffe's visit down to the dressing room area, and I think that also shows there's a connection there between them. Ratcliffe did speak to Amorim before making the appointment, so he got a face-to-face with him and was able to kind of understand what he was getting himself in for, and so I think that's still there. I think that's what that kind of meeting shows. And Ratcliffe himself has been pretty blunt with his appraisals at different times since he got the keys to the place, so I don't think he'll be I think he'll be understanding where Amorim's coming from when he's strong in his feedback.
Just one other thing, and forgive me if you didn't report this, and if you don't want to comment on it, we can cut this out, but after there were some reports that Jim Ratcliffe wasn't keen on some of the quotes from Dan Ashworth and Omar Barada before that Liverpool game. I know the quotes came out after the Liverpool game, and that was one of the contributing factors. I think you did write that, didn't you?
Yeah.
And how do you think he looks at this is the worst Man United team of all time from Amorim? Because it's, I think one of the things that Ashworth said was that the decision to keep Ten Hag came before I arrived, and there was some speculation that might be what Ratcliffe was a little bit annoyed at. That's not particularly strong compared to we're the shittest we've ever been.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, do you think Ratcliffe goes, bloody hell, I don't like
that? I think he's, I don't know. I don't know what is going on in his mind, obviously, but I feel like just when you look at how he's interacted with his staff so far at United, he's upset people, with how strong he's been. Obviously, he's taken pretty firm action to try and get the club how he wants it to be. So I think he would understand somebody having the kind of strength of their own character to call people out face to face. The Liverpool episode was more about, from what I can understand, a kind of suggestion that the people that were saying we weren't involved had some involvement in it, and I think they Ratcliffe, didn't want it to look like it was, all on him, or I think he wanted to have some collective ownership over the whole Ten Hag situation, and so that was the kind of major issue there.
Okay, well, that makes a bit more sense then.
Yeah, it does. You just hope there isn't any friction or any doubt from Ratcliffe towards Amorim. You just hope that them two can work together, because it does feel very much, no matter what he says, and if you've alluded to it, he's the driving force behind a lot of decisions. And I think if Ratcliffe decides that Amorim's done, he'll be done. I know it sounds melodramatic when he's only been here for a few months, but you want those two to work together and get on, and him to back this manager, because I know I sound like a broken record, but he needs backing, man. You can see we just haven't got the squad that we need.
And also, this isn't a threat, but if Ratcliffe doesn't like Amorim, he will come round and smash his telly. We know that now.
He's probably building for that already.
Yeah,
he's probably had. I bet he said like that's. I bet Amorim gets a pay slip. It's like minus 300 quid or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, what's this?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Mate, come on, cost cutting. We ain't having none of that.
No, he's just replaced it. Do you know those little black and white tellies you could get from Aldi about 15 years ago? The little battery powered ones. What's that? So we could get, I'm afraid. That's all they had left.
Blame the manager.
Yeah. Don't look at me. I would have loved that big 70-inch telly. We've got to use this one now instead, though. It's a little wind-up one. Luke Shaw winding the telly up. Right. Thank you, Laurie. Thank you for coming in. Thank you at home for watching as well. Get your thoughts in on all the things we've spoken about today. This bust-up in the dressing room. Are we worried about Ruben Amorim, or do we think he's actually just putting his foot down and getting Manchester United to look the way that he thinks it should look? Thank you, Jay, as well, of course. Thank you for joining us at home. We'll see you in a bit.